Okay. Well, we've had some other folks join, but we've sort of moved past the introduction stage. Maybe during Q&A. Welcome though to the Atlanta Ruby users group. But I want to give Wren a chance to present. And so, Wren, when you're ready, we're happy to have you take the floor.
Yeah. So before I start, Aaron, I lived in South Austin for 10 years. So I was off of Slaughter and 35, if you know where that is. No,
I've only been in Austin for a little over a year, and I seldom go south of the river.
that's a good idea. It's a better idea to stay north of the river. You're fine. But yeah, no, I used to live in Austin for a number of years. So it's nice to see another Austinite. In the chat, I just dropped a link. This is for the text-only version of the slides that I have. Didn't know if anybody had any color blindness issues or had difficulty with reading the text that I had. So I've dropped in plain text version of it for all of the slides that I have if you need it. Oh no, needs access. That's not gonna work. 2 seconds. That's not gonna work. So we're just gonna leave that off. I'm so sorry in advance. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Can you see the beautiful ramping up with Ruby?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. All right, well then here we go. Hello, my name is Wren. I go by she, her as my pronouns. I am a graduate of Turing School of Software and Design. Most of the technology that I work in is Rails, Node, Vue, SQL, Mongo. Not all of it by choice or by happiness, but whatever, it happens. I've been developing professionally for less than a year. Really quick, Turing is a school in Denver, Colorado that was started by Jeff Casimir, who is apparently well known in the Ruby industry, but I'm still kind of getting into everything and learning who's where, when, why. It is a 7-month program where we do backend program is Ruby, front end is JavaScript. We don't only focus on coding, we focus on test-driven development, behavior-driven development, and how to expand. And the big thing that Turing always says is we teach you how to learn just as much as we teach you a language. And so it's a great program if you're looking to give back to a community of junior developers. If you are looking for somebody of any skill level, we have an alumni pool, and we have people on the site that if you go to turing.io, you can reach out and speak with Robin, who's probably one of the most fantastic human beings I've ever met. And she can hook you up with different alumni who may be looking for new opportunities.
Haberme dado la oportunidad de estar aquí mientras la persona se está presentando. ¿Qué pasó? Que te dice que no, no encuentra eso.
Myra, are you talking to us, or is your mic just open?
I can't see the people anymore because I've got the presentation.
Okay.
All right.
I went ahead
I
and
did
muted her.
2 years
Yeah, I think so.
of Spanish on Duolingo, and I couldn't understand that.
Oh, she's full native. No, I don't think that was directed at us.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I was really trying to understand.
But so that's just really quick about Turing. You know, we turn out some fantastic graduates who are some of the best human beings I've ever met. And the thing I love about Turing is that none of us come from a background of coding for the most part. I was a zookeeper and a brailleist before I started with code, so it's pretty diverse. It's pretty fun. Before we start, I am unqualified to speak on this topic. My imposter syndrome needed you to know that. It's okay, and we're just gonna go with it. It's grand. Through Turing and through speaking with other devs, I've come up with these 4 things that really, for me, drive the way that I code, the way that I work, and the way that I participate in the wide world of development. And I feel like these are something that will really help you to understand me as a person so that you will better understand the topic that we have today. Listening is always better than talking. Open mouth is equals closed ears. Humble is better than hustle, and people do not equal stepping stones. Starting place, not a conclusion. I'm always looking to add to the list, to better the list, to make sure that I can continue to become the best developer that I can be along the way. My first job out of Turing was I graduated as the first group that went remote. So we got our very, very wonderful graduation ceremony over Zoom. And so we were the first ones, so nobody knew what they were doing. So we had like open mics everywhere, and it was insane. It was just absolute chaos. It was wonderful. I took an internship with a company called Fingal. They are a fantastic group of people, and actually our project manager is in Atlanta. And they, as you can see from the screen, they use Agile workflow pretty decently. And then we did a bunch of different development for them. This was an internship that eventually turned into a part-time job. They haven't fired me yet, so I think I'm doing okay. And it was a really neat company. The startup, when my group of interns came in, we literally doubled the company. So it was very small, very close group. We had 8 people total. And it really gave us a chance to see from beginning to end the full life cycle of how decisions are made, how it affects the code that we produce, or the projects that maybe got bumped down on the priorities list. So it was really an interesting experience. It was in Node.js and Vue 2, and we used Jest for testing. And I still have a burning dislike of JavaScript. Sorry, it's not my thing. From this, I learned that Agile is very difficult, but worth it. It was surprising to me how painful Agile could be along the way. There were times where you admitted that you were wrong. There were times that you didn't think you were wrong, but you still had to take a different course. We were with a bunch of developers who didn't always see the joy or the benefit in taking the time for testing. And so this was a great chance for me to learn how to advocate for what I needed to be the best coder I could be. And that meant testing. And testing was really good because it saved us from a very, very big mistake that we would have otherwise not caught in the code. And so it made it a lot easier to say, it's worth it. It taught me that I only knew my own job and did not know what was in the founder's head, what was in the project manager's head. And so it really kind of gave me that understanding that the company is an iceberg and I'm only seeing what's on top of the surface. Unsupervised junior devs can wreak havoc. That was my fault. Over communication is impossible. And then we took time to learn, and we took time for check-ins, and that was just really a great use of time. It seems counterintuitive to say step away from the keyboard and let's talk about things, but to be able to really code well, we took care of who we were as people, and we took care of who we were in the company, and that made our sense of purpose much stronger. Tech-wise, I still actively dislike JavaScript, but I can make code that passes. And this really was a great experience as a back-end developer. I've always made the joke that, and it's only halfway a joke, I want to be the person in the basement with 8 computer screens in front of them and absolutely no human beings in sight. That's what I always wanted to be. I want servers and databases, and I want to not care about what color the button is on the screen. So I always make that joke, and it's only halfway a joke. But it gave me a really good understanding as a back-end developer of what the front end needs in order to do their job, because all of a sudden I was having to do the front end work as well. Learned so much about startups and the decision-making process and the meetings and the hustle and how they manage everything. It was quite wonderful. My second job is working at Rieta. I absolutely love working with Frank. He is a fantastic human being and a fantastic boss, and I'm not just saying that because he's my boss. And I work in application security and development, and I've been doing that since November. And what we do at Rieta is kind of a threefold. I don't know how many people know Rieta, so I tried to give an overview. Hopefully I got it right. I didn't run this past Frank.
It looks about right, and honestly, I don't overshare this stuff enough with the Ruby group, so this might be new to people.
Yes. Okay. Stay tuned to see if I have a job tomorrow morning. I'm totally joking.
I'm sure you do.
We do maintenance. This is probably my favorite part of the day-to-day. And this is working on apps that are a little bit older. And these are companies that a lot of times don't have the budget or the need for a full-time developer, much less a staff. And so to be able to have them come to us and we provide that maintenance for their applications and potentially even their servers, and we can provide our expertise on a time limit that they can work with to give them what they need without them having to pay everything just towards a developer that maybe doesn't have 40 hours worth of work a week is quite wonderful. It means that I'm jumping from code base to code base. And so I may learn about one thing in this code base, and then I may jump over and do something completely different in another one. And it is absolutely so much fun to do. It is never the same every day. And it makes getting up in the morning at crazy o'clock absolutely wonderful. And crazy o'clock is my choice, not anyone else's. We also do security. This is varying levels of testing. We sometimes have clients who will come to us and say, kick the tires, where we have other clients who are saying, get a microscope and let's look at this. So we do different amounts of searching through their code base just to look for vulnerabilities or things that could cause problems along the way. If asked, we do estimates for fixing or updating or upgrading or different things for their development as well. We also do new application development, and this is a lot of fun, and it is absolutely anything you can imagine they'll bring, and it's fun, and you have no idea. And sometimes somebody brings something and they go, "Can you make this?" And it's like, yeah, we can. Let's do it. So it's different every day and wonderful every day. So far at Rieta, now I've only been there for a couple of months, so it's definitely still going to be a lot more growth. If you ask me these same questions in 6 months, you're going to get a different answer than you get right now. Ruby on Rails, I've learned, does far more than I had expected. There are so many different things and different ways that the application can be well implemented and can do different functions. Docker has been super fun. That has been a lot of learning and has really streamlined the process. I love server maintenance. I know I'm probably the most boring person in the world, but I absolutely love server maintenance. This is so much fun. Frank also allows us to sit in on client meetings, which has been great for understanding how we take what a client says and translate that into code. And so being able to see the process from this person speaks it all the way through to it's done has been fantastic. We also have different priority meetings, and that allows us to see the day-to-day, how do we adjust to streamline, to do better, to do more. And so that's been really neat. We did stuff. So now we get to the fun part. Now, Erin, I'm really sorry. This is not going to be technical. This is going to be the overview of the everything. So what we're going to get into now is more like the things that between job 1 and job 2, what went well and what has made the biggest impact in retrospect for the code and the growth that I have made and that I have seen my fellow interns and fellow coworkers make along the way. Number 1 is helmets, not training wheels. And this is where there are so many different analogies for it. If we're going to kick in the deep end and see if you need water wings, or, we're going to let you try and see how far you get. But this is the idea that you can let people try and fail. And failing is not failing. Failing is learning in a different way. And maybe you learned 7 ways that you can't implement that. But that doesn't mean that because it isn't implemented on those 7 tries that you failed. It means you learned what this error message means. It means you learned a new way to do that. It means that you learned something that maybe you're not going to use right now, but you're going to use it 10 years down the road. And it's fantastic. Prep work is wonderful for this. This is so this is the point where What made it work on the screen is going to be things that along the way, if you are a senior developer, maybe you can take some of this back towards your junior developers and implement it. If you're a junior developer, these are things that you can advocate for from your senior developers, because sometimes we don't know what other people need. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Prep is something that you could do. For instance, I had to look up how to renew an SSL certificate. And rather than giving me the answer, I was given, check out this, check out that. And so I went and found that information on my own. It made the learning more impactful for me because I was able to find that, but it also gave me a direction to start in. Communication is absolutely essential to make sure that people aren't just spinning their wheels, they're not feeling frustrated. Time boxing it, I'm a big advocate for saying, I need help, or saying, I'm stuck, but I'm not done trying yet. So can I have another hour? And then we talk through it and, hey, we don't have that hour, or we need to get this done right now, or yeah, go for it. And also having a more experienced developer available to say, you know, I'm really stuck, or I took down a server, can you please help me right now? Is always really wonderful. So having that availability from the senior developers to be there in case something does happen is very essential. Learning time is something that seems super counterintuitive to say, I want to take time away from my keyboard to learn something. But what I have found is that when I step back personally and watch a few videos, I can pick up the technology faster when I get to it, and I have a better understanding. My first job, we started with Node.js. We did not have any learning time. It was go do the thing. And I had production code 1 week after I started. And it was a struggle. And it was just banging my head on a keyboard. And so when we came to our second technology that they had us work in, which was Vue, we said, hold up, we need a minute. We need to take some time and learn. So we took 3 days and set it aside, watch videos, go play around, do some tutorials, do whatever you need to do. And when we got to it, we did more in the last 2 days of that week than we did in the first week working in Node. And part of that was just having a better understanding of what happens if I poke this? How do I use that? What is this thing called? And so taking time away was really wonderful. As a senior developer, hearing things like, oh, you should check out this book, or, oh, check out this tutorial, I found it really helpful, is fantastic, because there's a lot of stuff on the web. There's a lot, and not all of it is good. So having that ability to say, why don't you start looking down that direction? Also, along with that goes opinions and experiences. If you suggest a book and you say, yeah, but chapter 5, I have a dog-eared because I use it every single week. Or you say, chapter 6 is useless. Just skip it. It's fine. And that really helps along the way as well. And also being able to answer questions as a senior developer. Okay, Frank is really good at this. And I'm not just saying that. Frank is really good at this. Over the Christmas break, we had a couple days where we had some random work to do. And it was 20 minutes worth of work. We just had to change an email on this, or we had to update this one thing. So we paired on it for 2 hours, and I learned a fantastic amount of information that had nothing to do with that email or that server maintenance. But we ended up creating a new GitHub repo with a tool that we use every single day in our company. We ended up I got massive amounts of server maintenance knowledge, and it was completely unscripted. It was just, let's see how we're doing. And so Frank would check in with me as we were pairing, and he would say, well, did you get that? Do you understand that? Or do you know what this does? And some of it was information that may seem like it's not pertinent. But what it did was it gave me this beautiful global knowledge of what we were working on and how it all fit together. So I think that the pairing sessions where we maybe don't have a full schedule have been some of the most impactful learning that I've had as a junior developer. And those are the shut up and listen conversations where it's just, I am actively trying to drink from a fire hose and absorb all the information. But it's been so good. And some of it I used immediately, some of it I haven't used yet, some of it I used a week later. So it does have quite a bit of impact. Smaller groups or pair is the best for this, because then you can really see the person, you can interact with the one or two that you're working with in order to impart that knowledge and make sure that there's not any questions along the way as you go. And communication, obviously, this is more of a conversation rather than a lesson in the format, and quite wonderful.
You're thinking where we went deep into the innards of SSH configuration, aren't you?
I am, and I could just hear Laura in the background of my head going, "Y'all don't need to be doing that."
Yeah, not only did we I learned about proxy jump, which has been there for a while, but I didn't use it before. That was kind of cool. But we ended up creating a shared, like in our SSH folders, we actually have a Git repository now. And so we have like our private stuff and it's not included, but we have this whole shared SSH configuration that we can like create pull requests for and sync. And so any of us can be just like connect to this server, and the config actually is quite nice. It just jumps straight to where it needs to go with our separate keys, depending on who's the one doing it. It's pretty awesome.
It really is. It was a lot of fun. And then I got to explain that to the other new developer when he came back from Christmas break. And I'm like, "You've got to see this." So it was wonderful. Next one is UDU. And this is just the idea that we don't need to fight against, especially in the remote world where we can take a little bit more breathing room, we don't need to fight against our nature. I'm a morning person. By about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I am done peopling. I would like to go sit and be me. And so I find that for me, the best, most focused time of day is first thing in the morning. So being able to work with that, I have advocated at work for setting up my workload so that at the end of the day, I say, okay, what am I working on in the morning? And then I have that ready to go before our morning meetings. And then the rest of the day is planned out through that meeting, which includes the next morning, so that I can work on a schedule that provides the best work from me for the company and allows me to work in a way that my brain is slightly happier with. And this is just one of those things where, allowing people to be and not micromanaging and not feeling like just because you didn't code a ton this week doesn't mean that you're going to be, scrutinized next week for not doing it. Obviously, if a pattern becomes a pattern, we need to talk about it, but little bits here and there. Flamingos are welcome. So I'm not a normal person by any means. I have 3 children that randomly run through the background. I have currently bribed them to go outside and be anywhere but here right now. So that's why they're not in the background. But, being able to say, who are you as a complete person? And how does that fit into your life as a developer? And so it means that we have a very, very fun, diverse workforce at Rieta. And just we all laugh about the incidentals that happen, of I forget to turn off my mic and yell at my children to not put lettuce on the lizard in the middle of a meeting, or the lizard decides to climb on me during a meeting with a client, and we all just kind of laugh about it, and we all just accept that people are people. And especially during COVID, this is one of those things where compassion is just so key, and makes the fact that the company as a whole allows me to be both a mom and to also be a professional, it makes me feel valid and valued as a member of the team. And so having that is just fantastic. So being able to provide people with kids are going to run through the screen, or things are going to happen, or your computer's going to suddenly fall over in the middle of a presentation to the president of the company. These things happen, and that's okay. And we just all kind of laugh about it and keep going. And then Cheer Squad is one of my favorites. And this is the one where, as a junior developer, it is very easy for me to get heads down. I need to learn. I need to get to B. I am at A. I'm going to run until I get there. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to code. I'm going to do. This is where I'm at. And so to have somebody who sees my growth and development from a higher level, who understands where I was and sees the progress I'm making, makes a lot of impact as far as how I view the work that I do, because I see it through their eyes and I get their opinion. And so I find that to be extremely helpful and something that is very good for both motivating junior developers, but also for helping them to hone in on the things that are going well and also to maybe tune up the things that are not. Catapult the Juniors. I love my titles. I had so much fun with this. So this is more directed towards the senior developers and the people who are acting as mentors within the company. And that's, you know, these are the questions that will get you from, I have a person, I have a job, company needs to make progress, and how can you bring those all together and find the center of that Venn diagram and really make sure that people feel valued, feel like they're progressing. Because when you have an employee who feels like, and I should have brought the statistics on it, when you have an employee who feels like they are continuing to grow, then you are more likely to retain that employee. When they feel valued, when they feel like they can not spin their wheels, they will stay longer, and you will receive the benefit of the experience that they gain along the way, and also not having to ramp up a new junior right away. Thank you very much. And that is the end of my presentation.
I enjoyed it and I took notes.
Yeah, that was great. That was really great. Thank you.
That was good. Like that was all right. Breathe now. Breathe. That's good. There we go. All right.
Yes. And yeah, and to feed another one, I think read the SSH Madness Day. I think that was the first time you saw what a tar pipe was, like actually slamming data across a netcat connection.
Yeah, that was the first time that I've seen like almost anything, and now I kind of like tackle as I get into a server and I go, who am I? Like I think it's the first thing I do every time is like I know what user I logged in as, but I'm like I'm gonna use the tools.
That was awesome. No, that was a fun day. Wow, wonderful presentation. Trying to think about. Anyone have any questions, please? Sure, I can.
I'll throw out a question.
I'll throw a question later too.
Let's see. Okay, who's going first? Who's on first?
Well, I rose my hand, but you spoke first, so you do it.
I forgot my question. Never mind.
I apologize.
I'll go with Wren.
Yes.
What advice would you give to year ago Wren? What key lesson would you kind of take as the biggest value, biggest kind of tip to yourself a year ago?
Don't cry in class. It makes your teachers uncomfortable. No, but really, I think that a year ago me, it would have been I would have said, get your head up. You can do this. I did not have the luxury of having somebody go through the program ahead of me who could tell me about their experience as a single parent. And so it was pretty chaotic, and I wish that I had had that, but so it was very scary to go through school. But I would have said, get your head up, you've got this. And if you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have said, you are not your job hunt. And that's a hard one to get through your head. And it's very easy. And you can say, well, logic brain knows this, but sometimes it creeps up on you. And I didn't realize, I actually really had a culture shock when I started at Rieta, because I was just like, I'm employed? Like employed. Like I don't have to put out resumes. And it was actually really tough for me to get used to it. So I would say a year ago me is you've got this, and 6 months ago me is your job hunt is not who you are.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'll pick my question. I am currently self-taught, and I'm, again, always have a hard time with the job interviews. It's just not my strong set. I mean, long story. What tips would you give, and when interviewing with people who obviously know nothing about tech, how would you answer their questions without accidentally insulting them? Because that's been my issue.
Yeah. First thing first is questions. Absolute questions. When I start an interview with somebody, it was always, what is your skill level? How much of tech do you want? And how much of a high level overview do you want? And just setting that expectation from the beginning. You know, there's no problem when you walk into an interview of saying, are you in programming? Would you like me to get more into the tech details, or would you rather that I keep this more at a high level general knowledge? And they should be able to answer that right off the bat. And if they can't, then you should probably run away from the interview. I'm totally joking. Don't listen to me. As far as I would say find really, really quality resources. And that can be something like Turing.io has all of their curriculum, frontend.turing.io, backend.turing.io, and it goes through each of the lessons. Everything that they have is open source. They really push test-driven development. So if there's anything in there that even if you want to self-taught, you know, if you just want to go through the lessons yourself, I still occasionally go back and look at some of those lessons as they continue to update them and add to them to find the best resources and to better my knowledge. I would say find reputable sources and good programs that you can either follow along with or read up on or anything like that. If you don't know what they are, toss something on LinkedIn and you're going to get 4 billion responses right away. And, you know, filtering through them is hard, but it gives you a good starting spot.
Okay. Yeah, I literally taught myself to program when I was 5 years old by reading the manual in Debian command line. Just opened the terminal, typed man Ruby, man GCC, and started programming from there.
If I may jump
Yeah,
in, Bailey. Oh, go on.
Oh, I was going to just say, I grew up in a fundamentalist household and we actually didn't have a computer. I didn't play a video game until I was old enough to vote.
Really?
Yeah,
When I
it's a
was
culture
6
shock.
years old, I was building my own version of Command and Conquer with my own engine.
That's pretty cool.
It was built in SDL, OpenGL for graphics. I'm a nerd, and I got into programming. I graduated. I was like halfway through high school. The economy wasn't that good. I wanted to buy something, to have the money to buy it, and I could never get past an interview for anything really. I'll just have a hard time with conversations. So I just talked to some people I knew needed a website, built it with a static site generator that I actually built myself. It was written in Bash, and used static sites, CSS, and all that, and did that. Hosted it. Learned both Jekyll and WordPress. Built and sold WordPress plugins. Built and sold Jekyll themes and plugins.
Bailey, I'm going to derail you slightly. Back to your original question. And Wren's answer is really good, but a couple of I haven't interviewed for a job in a long time, but I've definitely talked with customers and I've definitely interviewed people, and it's going to sound really curt, but the one of the best tricks is just to Wren had a slide about talking versus listening. And so if you have to force yourself, there's a couple of techniques that help. One is 2 ears and 1 mouth. So you have so you should listen twice as much as you talk in any interview or any conversation, really. Another thing that really helps when someone asks something, even if you think you know the answer, because you probably do, because of your experience, pause and just be silent as you're thinking and fully contemplating what they've said. And even if you already know the answer, what this is doing is communicating a sign of respect that what they asked you actually takes time to think about, that you're not just jumping in to an immediate answer. And then even if you think you know the answer, ask follow-up questions. Like, did you mean, or one of the things I think it could look like this, and what do you think about that? And then hone in that way. And that sort of conversational style sits a lot better with people, and in those sorts of discussions. So, and you do have some challenges. You've openly stated, certain, challenges you have. So just a lot of practice to overcome those in that setting. You can totally nail it. You totally have it in you. So anyway,
Thanks. Thank you, my God.
you're good.
I'm fine on this.
Hey, I have a good question to continue the conversation. Wren, right now you are in the growth and excitement phase of your career, and you're embracing it. And I definitely have those feelings. I've been messing around with Hotwire, checked out Ruby 3 when it came out over Christmas. But I have some senior and staff level devs on my team who they've lost it. They're just not that jazzed about new things anymore. Look, we're working in JavaScript and TypeScript. It's not my fault. I fought really hard, but there are people who they make more money than me, you see, and their opinion matters more. And well, the die is cast. But still, when we were in dire straits at our very important launch date in June, I just jumped into the JavaScript, and yeah, it's icky, but you can make things happen. I want to know if you can describe those feelings again, so I can impart them onto these guys so that they get that reinvigorated sense that, yeah, I know it's not Ruby. It's never going to be as clean or as pure as it can be. But like learning new things, exploring new things. SSH config is what did it for me. I don't know anything about SSH config. I stay away from that. It's scary, and Cthulhu lies there.
Yep.
But that
No,
joie de vivre.
Stay in the terminal.
Yeah. So I actually, I have a very short career, and I understand that. But at the end of Turing, I burned out hardcore. I mean, it was like I would burst into tears to sit down at my computer. It was bad, and it was life caused and COVID caused and just general chaos. And I get that. And so it was quite a process to dig myself out of that absolute and utter burnout. And what did it was going back to, for me, the basics. It was going to the Turing curriculum, going into Mod 1 stuff, turning on a 90s playlist of the worst music, and I love it so much. I have such a place in my heart for it. Turning on the music and really just going back to straight Ruby. I got out of Rails for 2 months. I didn't code in Rails. And that actually came up in my interview with Rieta was, hey, there's a big old chunk on GitHub here with nothing in it. What'd you do? And so it was, being able to go back and just do some of the basics. I may have the name of a bird, but I am secretly a grout-field plant, and I don't like new things. And so, and especially not JavaScript. I know it's got its place. I'm working on it.
Hate JavaScript with passion. All my websites static type generator for obvious reasons.
But the getting over that hurdle of I hate working in this, I don't want to do it, because I also agree that TypeScript is a special level of hell, is just being able to celebrate the little things. And, it's hard if you're looking at this entire project that you're going to be doing, but when you can say like, I'm going to write 1 test, I'm going to write 2 tests, and then feeling that joy of like, I have written a test, I have done it, it passes, find the plugin of Nyan Cat that allows it to run across the screen. And then you have this like really weird fascination and you're emotionally invested in not killing the cat by running all the tests and making them pass, you know, or you get pride dots on the bottom. And so it makes it rainbow themed, but finding something that makes it more bearable. And then you find something else that makes it more bearable and something else and something else. And then you dig yourself out of that burnout. And I don't honestly know what sorcery I did that got me completely out of it. That's just what I can remember. I try not to think about it too much.
Do you mind if I hop in real quick? I just as like a weird, interesting perspective on hearing the question that Aaron's asking, and and hearing what Wren is telling us. It sounds like she is in this discovery process and being paid and allowed to learn something that she loves, and it's exciting. These staff and seniors are getting paid for their knowledge, and potentially if they have any management experience and people skills and what they can teach to people below them. But are they being encouraged and paid to go and do something that isn't, if they know it all, quote unquote, no one knows everything. I know that. I know nothing. Like paying them for 10% time, 5% time to go, hey, go do React and Aardvark right now. Like go work in AR, XR. Like what excites you? Like get excited and also still do your work. Like because it's at a certain point, like it's no longer exciting to do the same thing you do every day. We're human. We discover new things. That's why we doom scroll. We get serotonin hits every time we discover something new, right? So you are not allowing them to doom scroll knowledge. They're just doing the same thing day in and day out. And I worry about that when I get to that level.
I think another thing.
Yeah, you're
just maybe some, because we were talking about kind of some of the same concepts recently, and like we have a small team for I guess now 5 people that generally like we actually do blind tests. Do you like your job? Yes, but there's times where that goes down, and here's what I noticed. I predicted these timeframes. Essentially, we found there was 2 tracks. It's like either you're working on these longer term features, you're kind of in the day in day out of like fixing this quick bug or this typo or whatever. We kind of realized we naturally fall into those buckets. Everyone seems to burn out no matter what their interest in. Every time they're about 3 months into one bucket, right? Like if I put someone to like go rewrite our mobile app, which is a thing, and then he kind of went off and he was mostly focused on that, and he was like, all right, I want to get back to the day to day. When he was in the day to day, I remember talking to him. He's like, I'm burning out. Like this is like there's way too much occurring every day, and it was this sort of like desire for oscillation between front end, back end, desire for oscillation. So in some ways, like giving people assignments that put them outside their comfort zone, like with their permission, was a really helpful tactic, because like once you get good at something. But here's the other thing. I feel a lot of when we talk about bad abstractions, there's a people problem behind it. We let people do the same thing for too long. They get bored of it, and they make it more complicated to make it more interesting for themselves. And so if you just give them an actual place that needs new patterns, because it's, then they will find a way to be productive. Instead, they'll just destroy your code base, right? And because they'll just be like, I can do addition here, but what if I made an add or class that then called the add, like they'll come up with a way to make it more complicated, and they can't see that they're doing that because they're just kind of following their natural interest. So that's my 2 cents on that.
If I can offer in with Riaz there can be a couple of things on. I've come out of a background of working on multi-year projects with teams, and one of those things that you can do as an organization to try to help that that sense of like, man, I'm just grinding every day and I'm going nowhere, is inject, even if you have to do so somewhat artificially, inject a way for the developers to be able to observe feedback from users on what they're working on. If it's something that they're thinking that, because to Wren, kind of to your point, kind of pointing at studies earlier, the more, almost every study when developers are surveyed, what's the most satisfying part about your of your job? What's the most satisfying part of your job? It's seeing my stuff get used. So if you can get their stuff into the hands of people in usability testing, and integrate, things like that, and get some actual feedback to them that's legit, that can energize people again. That could be one of those things. Riaz also brought up a very good point. Be active as an organization in asking your developers, are you happy with what you're working on? Because organizations often fall into the trap of pigeonholing the experienced people into one area and ignoring the fact that they may not be satisfied themselves. So anyway, sorry. Thanks.
Thank you all for that. That was a bunch of great perspectives. I took a couple of notes, all paraphrased, I assure you.
I mean, last thing is also if you can just like find that super excited junior dev and put them on a team with a bunch of people who are like, okay, so in the course of the first month that I was there, I am very emotive and very outgoing, right? And so by the end of the first month, everybody in the team was going to celebrate when things happen. And even Frank was doing the like Muppet style arms flinging in the air when something went right. So finding somebody with the enthusiasm and bringing a new element into a team that has that, it's infectious. Like, when you find somebody who enjoys what they do, their skill level is one thing, but they also bring that joy to the team. And no, it's not going to fix everything, but it's one part.
I had a final question, or other people questions too, for Wren. So for me personally, I realized I was thinking, I've actually kind of been working on software now even since college. And I'm, now 10, 15 years outside of it. So I've never really worked outside of this world. And since you mentioned that you'd, done these other careers before that, at some point you were, entering those careers as well. What did you notice maybe from a culture perspective, that was kind of different for people entering into software versus entering into those careers in the past?
Yeah, software development is full of adults. It's kind of nice. I'm not even joking. People don't ask me how many bathroom breaks I've taken today. It's fantastic. I worked in a number of different jobs. I ran a phase 1 drug clinic for a while. I worked at a zoo for a while. I taught English in Japan for a while. I worked in a rainforest in Ecuador for a while. And most recently was working in the schools as a brailleist and working for a nonprofit. And so I've kind of had a little bit of everything here, there, and everywhere. And coming into software development, it was really fascinating because it is far less competitive than any other career path I've been in. There's a very noticeable lack of stepping on other people to make yourself look better. It is, what's the knowledge in your head? How can you use it? You go into a code challenge, it doesn't matter if you made yourself look good. Can you code? And so coding is far more merit-based, which I find fantastic, and it allows me to interact with people who I may not have otherwise have had the opportunity to, because maybe their background is different, or their, insert anything is different. We're a weird bunch of flamingos, and I really like it.
Yeah, I have to say I enjoyed that aspect myself. When I was going to college, everyone was very toxic and aggressive for absolutely no reason. Especially the staff. I found so many security issues with the database at the school, and I'm like, guys, you need to fix this. I can get my social security information out of this. If I can do mine, anyone could probably grab everyone's credit card and all that, and probably change that. And they did nothing. And then when the school got hacked, fortunately, I already dropped out of that school because it was a massive issue.
Aaron, I really appreciate you dropping in the Japanese. I will tell you that I cannot read Japanese, and the only word that I very, very firmly remember is masui, and that's the word for an epidural, and they don't do that in Japan because I think the pain of childbirth will make you love your kid more.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I learned Japanese a while ago. I'm not nearly as good as the keyboard makes me look.
Nice. No, I did not retain enough of it. Since learning Japanese, I also learned tactile signing and Braille, and so the Japanese fell out of my head.
Where did you teach in Japan?
I spent a year in Nagoya, which is the 4th largest city, and then I spent a year working in Nagano Prefecture, just outside of the city of Ida, in this little village called Achimura, and I was teaching English and helping wrangle butterflies, aka children in a taiko class.
That's awesome. I was fortunate. I was able to live in Tokyo for a month and a half and Osaka for a month and a half as well. And I just barely got by on what I knew.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place to be. If I could have, I would have stayed.
Yeah, coolest place I've ever visited.
Where
Wren,
else have you been
oh,
besides
oh,
Japan?
I've lived on 3 different continents.
Where
I've
else?
lived in the United States, Ecuador, and Japan, and visited multiple others.
Wren, I was going to ask. I mean this. So, what as someone coming in and working with some of the things, you know, where our company has a different perspective than a lot of other firms. Did you find any of that shocking? And I'm thinking more about some of the pushback we give customers that maybe you wouldn't expect, but I don't want. But anyway, I just want to get your perspective on that, like freely here, like for the group, or is there no difference?
So going from a startup where people, I mean, they heavily utilize the Turing internship, which provided a funded internship because that was how we made progress. And they only had, you know, bare minimum staff to keep the lights on because they had not hit the point of raising capital yet. Versus coming to Rieta was a very, very big difference in both the way that the company is run as well as the way that decisions are made. And Rieta decisions were, I feel, very well thought out. And I also really loved that the project manager, Laura Hamilton, she takes care to make sure that we understand her thought process. So, which makes things like, hey, I need you to drop everything and go change over to this other project instead. We don't grumble and do it. We understand where her brain is at and we understand why the decision was made. We may not understand all the little bits of it, but we understand enough to know, okay, let's go do it. And we do it without grumbling, ever.
Thanks.
Was that the answer?
No, I'm not fishing for an answer. I'm curious. See, so here's, this is why this is so valuable and it's helpful. I've been self-employed so long, I don't know how the real world works. Like, if that makes any sense at all. And so, no, that's actually one of those things that I struggle with.
It's the same for me. I've basically, by circumstance, had to have been self-employed my entire life. So, and then I tried to apply to a job, so I'm like, why the hell do they do it that way? It's like common sense. Don't do it that way.
And so it's always really fascinating to me, especially with like there's like a security issue or something. I get brought in as this like really senior level guy, analyze the problem kind of stuff. And I'm sitting here thinking like I never got a paycheck until I was forced to like start writing them to myself. And so like I truly am mystified by like corporate politics and stuff, even when I have to like be the outside consultant. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
so no, I wasn't fishing for anything. I was curious.
No, I was just making sure I was answering your question. There's definitely, you know, there was a little bit of a, I don't want to say sticker shock, but there was a little bit of an, oh, there's a discrepancy between A and B. But then once it was explained and the way that that Rieta runs is that I don't think that there's been a question that I haven't been given an answer to yet. And the answer may not be what I was looking for. And the answer may be, this is the way that this is done, or this is something that is not really something you need to be privy to, and that's fine. But every question that I've asked has been answered to the best of abilities, and so that makes it really fascinating. But yeah, no, the only sticker shock came from seeing like how looking at the amount of hours that go into setting up a corporate into a lawsuit, and then looking at the rate for that and going, oh, that's the only one.
Oh yeah, that was ridiculous. And so to Nicholas' question, actually I can answer this along with Wren's help, because we actually just had one example of that. So Wren, Nicholas was asking, how do I push back on clients? And so a couple of the things I've done is, one, I've been in development for like 2 decades. 2, I'm an expert witness. 3, I'm an expert witness because I'm a student of computer science. So I like have books on why software projects fail. And so when I guest lectured at like, what was the boot camp? I've done several guest lectures, and I kind of get like the reputation as being the angel of death. Like, you basically shouldn't write code because you're going to get hacked and everything is going to go south on you. Like, you know, this like train of doom. Okay. Yes. But we were in a couple discussions with a client, and and Wren was on. So I think one was, we had an entire discussion about options where pricing was never once discussed. It was all about risk. It's like, option A, you have this much risk of project failure. Option B, you have this much more risk of project failure. And then another was, you have even more risk of project failure. And then he's like, what if I wanted a rewrite? I'm like, you're not getting a rewrite. And then
No. Hang on, Frank. The conversation went, and I should get an Oscar for not cackling on screen. Is the client went, how much would it cost for a complete rewrite? And Frank went, no, we're not doing that. And then he went, but how much would it cost for a rewrite? And Frank went, no. And he went, but what if we rewrote it? Frank's like, no, we're not doing that.
I'm like, dude, your chance of project failure is like 85+%. Like, why would I, in good conscience, give you that as an option? And so that's one example of where a deep knowledge of history and projects really helps you. Another thing, and Wren wasn't on this call, but we have the channel called Emergency. And so the idea is in the Slack, so of course, you know, we have things, so we're very careful what goes on to emergency, but emergency is all hands on deck. This is basically an incident response situation. Someone has something and it's a now, right now. And so another team member, when it joined, went in with me on that call to shadow. And what he told me the next day is like, he had never in his life seen like an entire room of people just shut up and start listening to what I was saying. And it was because basically I'm the security consultant brought in by the CTO, and they are in the middle of figuring something out. And so just that sort of thing, I don't know where I'm going with that, other to say that if you give a reason and you can push back. Another thing, in the past, I had someone I worked with that didn't want us to do some security related thing. I'm like, no, we're gonna do it. It's like, but I don't want to pay for it. It's like, I don't care. It has to be this way. And we ultimately did it. It was the right thing to do. And my proudest moment was when I was told that the entire board resented me because I had made them aware of this circumstance that they had to deal with now, because they were legally obligated to take care of something when they were aware of it, versus being. So those are a few vignettes. I'm not sure that's reproducible for a lot of people, but you know, I care a lot more about doing the right thing, and I could care less about doing what the client wants to pay me to do. When there's a match, that's great, but so yeah.
I had a tactic that when I was freelance for about like 2 years, you know, 2016, 2017 part of, and like one of the things I found was a natural instinct in me, and I kept seeing other consultants and people brought in, was like, oh, you're paying me by the hour and I have to show expertise, right? And like, therefore, the thing you should see is like pretty and polished. And like, and sometimes this is kind of a thing that happens when you have like some project managers in front of the developers in a freelance situation. And like, I kept finding that like the thing that the customer is really most paranoid about, it's like the asynchronous information. That's like, am I getting the right value? Are you telling me the truth? Like, do I know everything you know? And the more I kept just saying everything I was thinking of doing, as if like I was just on their team and making sure I'm not as a consultant. Like, I'll show you builds every day when they're broken. I'll show you, I'll explain every piece of the process I'm going along. That it allowed them to also get somewhat educated on what's easy, hard, and what kinds of changes cause easy or hard problems. And even if it's like, okay, great, I don't care. I was like, no, you're going to listen on this call. I'll give you the short version of it. But it helped a lot because a lot of it just comes from they have absolutely no idea what's easy or hard to change. They don't understand the process. They don't know what you're doing. And so a lot of times I found the more I kind of explained and stopped trying to show everything pretty and perfect and show how messy what we're doing is and the trade-offs, they understood and actually they would be like, oh, we could change this, but that's probably going to be too hard and too long. I can kind of tell. And I'm like, yes, they're getting it. They're understanding what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And similar thing happened when I used to do a long time ago videography. Like people have no idea what goes into it. And Frank obviously has been working on it for a long time. It's like, as you kind of explain little bits of it, people start getting, it's like, well, yeah, of course I can't get a drone shot. We don't have a drone and licenses and blah, blah. And the clients can kind of fix and correct themselves. Otherwise they'll get down on ride. They're like, of course I can do this. And then you say no and they get pissed. So.
We recently had a client who brought us a dumpster fire of code, and I'm saying that as nicely as possible, but we advocated pretty hardcore and we explained why taking X action that would cost them X amount of money that they weren't expecting. They thought they were bringing us, oh, just do this quick thing. And it's like, no, we can't do that quick thing. We need to put this in place first. And so being able to communicate what the value is for them, what the benefit is for them, and how this is going to affect them in the long term. Like, yeah, you're going to spend X thousands of dollars right now, but you're not going to end up talking to us again about this in 8 months, in 14 months. You're not going to have to talk to us about this particular problem again. It will be a fixable problem. It'll be a problem again because technology always improves, but it won't be the same problem and it won't cost you X amount of money every time.
That is a very good point. I always have a hard time when I'm trying to negotiate a contract like that because most people don't know squat about any of this. And of course, I'm probably the only person without a degree here, except for maybe you, but it's...
I have a degree in healthcare, but that's totally not helpful.
So
I'm coming from education. It kind of helps. My soft skills are really good, but otherwise, you learn really quickly.
So I have a computer science master's in undergrad from Georgia Tech, and I still went through 7 years of hell on earth to figure out how to consistently get paid for applying that technical knowledge. So there's a lot of skills beyond the technical that are really valuable, and you do not need those kind of degrees to be a developer for line of business applications, which at the end of the day is most of us are working on. I mean,
Yeah,
you're doing some
always my
gaming
one-
stuff, which is, yes, you had to study the math and things. So you had to be a mathy person, even though you don't have a specific degree. But yeah, it's not.
Only reason I wanted to go to college was actually to help improve the social skills. I knew going in that everything was at best 20 years obsolete. My dad went to Georgia Tech. I taught myself using his C textbooks when I was a kid. And they didn't even, when I applied to tech, they didn't even teach C anymore.
No.
And I was actually legitimately surprised they don't teach C anymore. I'm like,
Well, Georgia Tech doesn't teach anything, really. If you let me back that up real quick. Traditional computer science education is not the same as software engineering. So you do programming, but other than your intro class or maybe two, they actually don't teach it. It is just something you apply as you take a class on another topic, on networking, on when I did it, they had a software engineering class, which was in Squeak, which is a derivative of Smalltalk, because which is a fabulous language. And in hindsight, it's probably why I love Ruby so much. But it's not something you can just take and run with.
Yeah.
And anyway, but I hear what you're saying. But no, I would say a degree in the modern days is nice. In fact, as a business owner, traditional computer science graduates are very hard to place on a development team unless they have some unusual skills picked up elsewhere, such as freelancing, or they're being hired by the FANG companies. Which here's the difference: your company is not a FANG company. They hire developers like the Army hires privates and keep them busy constantly. Almost no other business outside of that space is capable of doing that. And they also do like they will hire people just to keep their competitors from hiring them. So it's like locking up the market. And so almost no one else operates at those scales.
Frank, will you write a letter saying that to my engineering leadership? Because that would help me so damn much.
Sure. I don't understand which part do they need to hear.
That you are not a FANG company. This is what they are doing. We are constantly internally comparing ourselves to that, and I'm like, it is an order of magnitude difference. Please help me.
A FANG company will hire someone
one of these giant companies in the first place?
A FANG company will hire someone for $120,000 a year to put them away in an office doing something that will never see the light of day, just to keep their competitors from hiring that talent to work on their product.
The scary part about all of this, there's statistics. I think it was about 2 years ago, somebody said, if over the next 5 years with the growth of tech, the FANG companies are going to literally suck everybody who comes out of a college with a degree. It doesn't care which one it is, and everybody else is just going to be like, they can take everybody. And everybody else is going to be like, okay, where do we find devs? And it like people talking about FANG companies. I had a friend who worked on a dev team, and there was a guy who came from Georgia Tech. He's like, I got 2 guys on my team. I'm like, oh, this shit should be good. He's like, I got a guy coming out of Georgia Tech bootcamp, and I got a guy coming out of Georgia Tech as a computer science grad. I put 2 of them on a team for a week just to show my senior engineer that I know what I'm talking about. And he's like, at the end of the week, the guy from Georgia Tech is barely just getting into what he's doing. The guy from Georgia Tech bootcamp has a finished product. The code's crappy, but it works.
Yeah. Another thing I
do.
Oh God, who's talking? Thank you, by the way.
No, go ahead.
So another thing that I run into all the time, and this actually makes me angry. And this is where I'm gonna put on the mean, grumpy old programmer hat. Is front-end frameworks that change very frequently, and single-page applications that I have seen hoisted upon client organizations that have no business with such a complicated front end, and it hurts them, and it hurts them bad, because what we could have developed as using traditional Web 2 techniques like in just straight Rails, their cost of development is now triple. They cannot afford it. The front end gets locked in with the expectation that it will be completely ripped out and replaced within like a year or two, which is completely nonsensical. Every small business or government client that I have ever had basically expects their software to function for 5, 10, or 15 years with maybe minor upgrades. If you think about it this way, what kind of person buys a house and then says, I'm tired of that house, and buys another house? They expect to be able to at least sell their house and move, right? But that's what we're doing to people when we give them technologies that don't have the longevity of being supported over a long period of time. This is why I'm so brutally vocal about why automated testing. The number of applications that I have seen that lack completely lack regression testing, and yet the client depends on these things. And the first thing you're saying and by the way, we didn't do updates. Oh my gosh, our cloud provider says that our platform is not supported anymore after 6 months. What are we going to do? It is not possible to secure. It is not. Okay, I'm gonna back up for a second. Lack of security.
We get mad, Frank.
I'm sorry. I'm
I
getting
said,
on
ooh, we get
soapbox.
mad, Frank. This is my favorite.
This is
Let's do this.
we have a word for this. It's called verklempt.
When you don't have an automated test suite, you cannot do security. Period. One of the primary ways on the OWASP top 10 is deploying software with outdated components. By definition, the primary reason Equifax got hacked is they couldn't update fast enough. There are other problems, but let's just go with that. Equifax couldn't patch. Actually, they're in good company. The statistics say that 38 days is the average amount of time for a production application to be patched from a vendor supplied update to a CVE. Custom software is worse. When you don't have a test suite, you actually cannot patch. It takes time. And worse than the big company, the development team is gone because we fund development as a capital expense and then the team moves on to something else. So now we have basically have an entire industry that leaves clients in a sea of unsupport and destitution until it comes crumbling down on them. And the people that caused this damage are long gone, and they pat themselves on the back because they did something really cool in development. And they're absolute.
And that's why
they're absolute monsters. Not saying they're monsters internally, but like they oh, I got a better job offer, I'm gone, and they take that knowledge with them too. So I'm not saying that you should, but we have far too little saying that the people I'm working for are making a sacrificing investment of money that's coming from somewhere to accomplish something, and they deserve and need the ability for this software to be supportable and maintainable and to continue function for many years for them to see a return on that investment. And I feel like we need to be stewards of that as developers.
Yeah, that's why
That's
a lot of
that's one reason why sorry, Ted. That's one reason why I personally. No. Sorry. You finish. I think you started talking first, Ted.
Yeah, just real quickly, to Frank's point, this is why it's so important for organizations not to get wrapped around speed to release, but speed to second iteration, because you can do a lot of things to make make it to that finish line quickly, but if you don't have the proper things in place to be able to make that second iteration go quickly as well, that's where a lot of your issues can hide. So thanks.
No. I was saying something along the same lines of that's everyone should just be using on focusing primarily on. I'm not really obsessive about technology. Well, I'm obsessive. I'm not like, ooh, new, shiny. I want it to work. I want to, like, for example, my computer. I run a Debian-based Linux distro. I want to be able to turn this thing on, leave it on all year, maybe update the kernel in the summer when the latest Linux kernel comes out, reboot once the whole year, and just keep going. I just want it to be reliable.
I'm sorry, as a security professional, I have to ask, are you putting in the security updates? Because that doesn't sound like you added the security updates.
No, the security updates you don't have to reboot for. They don't want a full system update. You have to reboot.
Okay, you were about to give me an eye twitch.
You didn't know that about Linux?
No, she's
No, I know, but I'm just making sure that we know.
Well, I was only talking about like a full system update with the new kernel, new firmware set, new driver set, new everything. Of course I need a security update. I just did circuit this morning. My morning ritual is get up, read my emails, run the security updates, drink my coffee, throw the bone from my dogs, get them to shut up, then start programming. So,
well, that's a lot easier. That is. But yeah, thank you. But sorry, I'm glad I got on the soapbox there for a minute, y'all. But
no, I get on that same rant all the time. People will always use like the latest and greatest technology stack. My most recent freelance client. The person moved from PHP to automate their cron jobs on the Linux server using Node.js. But Node.js is great, but it changes constantly. And this is supposed to be a long-term production environment. And unless they are using something stable, and unless something that justifies the finicky, pain-in-the-butt nature of Node.js, just use Ruby, just use Python, just use PHP.
Well, I mean, AngularJS is on the Google graveyard list this year.
Yeah, I hate Angular. For like front-end web development, I want a simple, dead simple UI.
But
JavaScript was...
But hear me out. There are people out there right now who someone wrote them a Angular 1.0 interface 5 years ago. They don't know that it's on Google's kill list. Because the devs are gone. And I
want to know?
Yeah, go on.
I was just saying to that point, one really interesting place. So there's a Chrome extension that will try to detect technologies used on a page and then kind of tell you, because it's fun as a web dev. Angular 157 on the Apple iTunes Connect deployment site to get an iOS app out. If you don't, without Angular, you cannot deploy an iOS app. The Apple Portal Angular app, which I just found really interesting because at the time they had built this thing was the time I think there was a lawsuit between the two. And so it's very, very interesting and ionic, and they've been stuck on it for years. They can't update it.
Oh, that's precious. Oh, don't get me started on Apple Silicon. Apple just rebrands the chips. The A14 is just a rebranded A14 Cortex. The Apple, like the AIM-1 Mac, is objectively no better than my ARM64 Pinebook. Objectively no better. He runs an A14, I run an A7 Cortex, but I'm not running bloated garbage software on here. I'm running very, very efficient stuff written in C that takes maybe a megabyte of RAM with a GUI.
Right.
This thing had...
I have a question along a different thread, and it has to do with company culture. I was wondering if any of y'all had been in an organization that grew faster than its culture could scale, and just what is your personal experience with it? Of course, the plural of anecdote is not data, but it's valuable to hear other people's perspectives.
My first job out of Turing, the internship grew like literally quadrupled within the last 8 months. And I got lost in the shuffle. And the best thing I did was to advocate and say, I'm gonna make my own little area over here. If you need me, I'm over here. And basically I went in one day to a meeting. Well, I Zoomed into a meeting with the engineering lead architect. And I was like, hey, you don't have testing and you're kind of dealing with people's money. So I'm gonna go be testing. If you need me, let me know. And they literally kept me on because I created my own niche and I said, here, I'm over here. And that doesn't help as far as like culture goes, but it does help as far as like the workload goes. It's just advocation. So.
Yeah, always.
I can.
No, go ahead, Ted.
You go, Bailey, this time. You yielded to me earlier, so by all means, please.
Oh yeah, I personally feel that a lot of people, especially in startups, I've only worked for like maybe 3 startups, and I decided 3 is more than enough. I will never do it again unless the pay is good enough. That is the one caveat. Most of the time, they don't care about writing the code in a clean, neat, scalable way. It's just feels like you're vomiting over the keyboard and you're relying on that one man or woman who was brave enough to write a unit test to kind of prop up the industry, when most people should probably just focus on making the code readable and maintainable first, then use all the tests for the non-obvious bugs, like you're passing the wrong data type to the thing.
So what I would offer is, from an organization, from a culture perspective, Aaron, is that a lot of companies can face a lot of different challenges in this respect. Okay. One of the key things that can be valuable, because one of the biggest limiters tends to be that, for example, small shops continue to have small shop mindsets as they become medium-sized shops, and medium-sized shops have medium-sized mindsets as they become big, right? So there can be a lot of value to an organization bringing someone in that has already been successful at that next level. And as distasteful as sports analogies are, it can be a lot easier to get to the Super Bowl with a Super Bowl winning or appearing head coach than an organization that is full of people who have never been to the Super Bowl, right? Because there are simply different mindsets that can govern those different organizations. Now, there can be toxic aspects that can also find their ways in, obviously, right? We know that, but it tends to be, and I think this even kind of goes to some of the things that Wren was speaking about as far as first starting in, as you first become a developer in this new kind of area and everything, a lot of our restrictions tend to be self-limiting, right? You're that small company and you're like, man, if we really had the money to do this, we would do this differently, right? Well, once you become a medium-sized company, you tend to actually have more access to capital than you would at a small, and maybe it is worth that kind of investment. Maybe it is worth investing that $100,000, that $1 million, that $10 million in that effort, because it's ultimately going to pay off. Something that you never thought you would be able to do when you were 5 people sitting around a table. You know what I mean? And having someone with that kind of vision and capability and experience and saying like, hey, you know what? Good usability testing sure can be worth $15,000 a day at a usability testing lab. You know what I mean? And when you're accustomed to just kind of like calling up your onesie twosie partner and customer and asking them to test for you, it can be a far bigger stretch to think that way, to just simply have a different mindset. So that's what I would offer.
I've got a.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
My limited experience here, and culture comes top down, and I agree that you can hire especially when you have that founder effect, you can look to hire your boss, up managing with your boss and learning from them. But when it comes to it, your culture is derived from the top and from the bottom. It goes both ways. If you're going to hire people that aren't willing to accept and mold into the current culture, and at the same time have the organization accept all the best parts of what they bring to your new culture, like you're going to end up with all the toxicity that comes from people who aren't going to work together, and so hiring rapidly, you can still maintain culture if it's an emphasis there that this is who we are. We are defined this way. This is what we do. We accept. We bring people into our culture. You have to be the same. We have respect. There are certain tendencies that go along with it. And when you have that culture in the first place, even if you're blowing up, people will gravitate and apply because they want to work there. And that's just, I don't know. There's a whole bunch that goes into maintaining your culture as you move into management and leadership that is its own world. And yeah, I don't know how to better explain that without going into lots of examples that are not mine and just studied.
All right, so adding on to that, and this is, oh, hey, I'm also a Boy Scout trainer as well, is we use the 4 stages of team development, which is forming, norming, storming, and performing. And so I highly suggest you look those 4 up. There's a 5th one, adjourning, but it doesn't fit in with the sound, so I'm not going to allow it. Totally my choice. But understanding the best thing that you can do for your team culture is to understand your team's temperature along the way. Is your team storming? Are they performing? And you can bounce between all of the phases of team development. It is not we form and then we norm and then we storm and then we perform. That is not how this goes. You can bounce between them back and forth. And so understanding where your team is on that 4-point system can really help you to drive and guide the team culture, because if you're storming, there is no culture. It's just a bunch of people thinking everybody else is wrong. But once you get to performing, and the path that you take there is dependent heavily on understanding where you are and where you want to go and how you get there.
Yeah, one of the thoughts I just had to add on to what Ted was saying, and maybe in some ways slightly kind of challenge that idea, is like, at least in my experience, I haven't actually seen that much difference when companies are changing these scales. Like large companies, at least in developer world, just tend to be squads of the smaller companies essentially working on different parts of the code base. And so like one of the excuses, I think is what you're kind of getting at, I've heard from like people that I've sometimes worked with, is like, oh, we don't have time to do this because we're just trying to get it out the door and we need to be agile versus actually like test, in a good example, right? And it turns out that like in reality that wasn't that, like you were going to spend more time not testing, is the moment stuff gets out there and it gets used, it's going to start breaking, right? Like if you actually do it smartly, let's just say I'm going to do feature testing at the very least to see the whole thing works together, right? Gets you 85% of the way there. Doesn't take that long, right? And it's going to help you within the next week. And what I find is that people sometimes, and I don't want to name names, but it's like definitely some companies that have blown up successfully business-wise, but they made a lot of those compromises, and their story in their head was, oh, when we get back to this, they're excusing themselves because I was just trying to get it done. And then when they're doing new projects, they're making the same mistakes. Like even at scale, we recently have had this pleasure of integrating with a lot of Fortune 500s. Blessedly, their business is kind of at that scale, and there's weird things. We're just this very niche provider, and I'm like, I just have in my mind, because I never worked at a big company, like they must have these rigorous rules and processes, and like they must know what they're doing. And I'm like, they seem to have like there's a lot of like officially we're doing this, and then under the hood they're not doing almost any of it. They're doing startup style, hack it together, get it out the door, and they catch it sometimes, but just throwing money at the problem. So kind of just getting back to like, I think like it just comes down to like hire the people that are going to have the right balance for what you agree with and want, and they're going to do the same thing no matter what size the scale is. But like, you know, I wouldn't, you know, to me one of the lessons I kind of learned is like, don't go into an organization trying to change it. Sort of like a relationship, like go into an organization that matches your natural behaviors and practices and desires. And if those things are important to you, then do that. And if you actually enjoy being a cowboy coder, and you're like, I just want to do that, then find a bunch of other companies with cowboy coders and they're okay with that, right? Like match what you want to what you're looking to the company type. Don't go in being like, oh, I'll change them to be more to do these better practices, because you'll probably end up with a lot of frustration. They're not doing them because you weren't there. They weren't doing it because they didn't want to do them. So
I can jump in. Thank you, Riaz. If I can jump in, one thing I want to share, and this is, I've been contemplating the question, which what I recall was, what do you do to maintain culture in the face of rapid growth? And my initial thought was that that's the wrong question. And the reason I think that is there are aspects of the current culture that may be very good, but there may be aspects of the current culture that are holding the organization back as it grows. So, for example, out of my own personal thing, one of my biggest challenges is not that I have ever desired to be a micromanaging boss. In fact, the times I've been burned, it's because I delegated fully. I delegated negligently, and then the person to whom it was delegated didn't follow through. And then that's the source of my ongoing anxiety dream of basically my anxiety dream is not that I missed class, it's that everyone left and left me holding the bag, or variations of that. So from a culture standpoint, what that did as we grow is trying to reduce bus factor. Well, you can't do that when you're 2 people. You can't do that when you're 3 people. You can barely do that when you're 4 people. But when you're going to 4, 5, and 6, and 7, there's a correct culture shift where I might, for example, think, I can just do this. I know how to do this. I've done this for 20 years. But no, I need to sit and have a nice pairing session with Wren because Wren needs to learn this too, so that there's not a bus factor of me. And that's actually a shift in culture. This isn't just saying, hey, Wren, go do this. This is let's do this together. And what I'm hoping is that she will learn and be able to help with that because, as the company has grown, I can't be, as the owner, developer, CEO type consultant person, like, I love code. I love to code. If I could, that's all I would do. But there's these other non-code things that really create insane value for my customers. Sitting on a meeting and selling the customer, no, because no junior developer is going to do that, right? Like that's a value I bring. And I can't do that and everything else that I used to do. And so that culture of embracing the growing team is a shifting of the culture. And it's a different culture, but it's good. I will say I have never once wanted to work in an office. So a lot of companies now are being forced into everyone works remote. That's very different from having said, we never want an office. If someone used to, go into the office to get away from their kids so they can focus at work and then go home. And now all of a sudden their kids are running around the living room laps and they've never worked in that home environment. There's a lot of people that are super stressed. And the other thing is having, work from home in a pandemic when your kids are out of school is not the same as a software engineer who decided that work from home was for them and set up an awesome home office. So there's a lot of culture shock and conflict that's happening in different organizations that are different from a remote first kind of situation where, like, this is how we work. This is how we always work. Anyway, those are just some thoughts. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying kind of, think about the culture as a term of values as opposed to how we interact. Because, and to Riaz's point, I think the limit is 4 or 5 people who can effectively work on a software project team. Like, so after that, if you draw that diagram of the different communication paths, the edges explode combinatorially, and so you usually end up splitting off into separate teams, even in a large org. Anyway, I'll get off that soapbox, but that was my thinking on that.
This is
Cheers.
where my flamingo slide comes in. We're all flamingos. It's all, this is, I don't know. My personal opinion on what Frank said is also that some of it is also take some introspection and decide, are you dragging your feet because you like the culture the way it is and you're not ready for change? Or is it that the people are changing it in a negative way? Because sometimes we are not ready for change. We're not ready for things to become different. And if we're not, then is that part of the problem of the culture, is that we're not ready for that?
I don't know. Does that make any sense? And thank you, Wren.
Yeah, it does. It's a lot of good points, a lot of good things that the company has gone through a number of different phases. And as of right now, we are actually on the downslope of culture, and we need to pull it back up. We need to regain that engagement and ownership over our domains and our code. I've had to reestablish norms around on call and the importance of it, and demonstrate exactly why it's valuable. And there's a disconnect at multiple levels of the company that just need a lot of focus on it. But just as you go into it, you can come out of it. So it's the same approach. You just need to find the people that embrace those changes and champion them and encourage them in those correct areas. And when you're in a position like mine, it's really just focus on your high performers. If I can't push a low performer as forward as I want, there's diminishing returns in the amount of time I have to spend, and I hate that. Like it really like burns me. But at the same time, I only have 24 hours in the day, no matter how much I petition. I haven't gotten any more.
So
Does
one
your
thought
organization-
go on, Ted.
Yeah, I was going to offer. Within your organization, do you do things like retrospectives? Any kind of like introspection, any kind of thing to that respect, and then making sure that those retrospectives are action oriented, not simply observational, because that's
the hardest part.
Yeah, a lot of companies think observing a problem is fixing it.
Exactly. I deal with a lot of I'm being heard, my team's concerns are understood, and then, oh, no, I missed it again. It's not that. It's that last third part, that follow through.
Yeah, sometimes, an exercise of doing, kind of brainstorming the different challenges, or, there are a variety of different kind of techniques around that, but where you can simply identify and then collectively as a team try to whittle down to a couple that they feel that are the most valuable, most impactful to correct together, and to create at least a plan around one or two items and try to get back at least into a little bit of an upswing on improvement again. And, it's a big topic. It's not a small challenge that you might be facing, obviously. But that could be something with it too. If you want to chat on the side, I'm happy to kind of help.
Sure. Are you in the Rails meetup group?
I am.
Oh wait, I found you all through the Atlanta meetup. Never mind, I'll find you somehow. We'll get a conversation going. Don't worry.
The mama duck in me asks, how are these people doing as people? If you're having issues with them on the team, how are they doing as people? Is it that I have a friend who works at a company where he's terrified of his son walking through the background of the video because the company doesn't have a culture that allows people to be human and to feel okay and have that grace of just like stuff's going to happen, or allow them a little bit more breathing room to just be people. So I imagine, just from the short time I've had with you, that you have those check-ins with people, but I think that question one on any sort of change is, how are your people doing as people?
Yeah, it's a good observation. Some of them are having difficult times being younger in their lives and losing out the cultural aspect of work along with the social aspect of the rest of their lives, when you don't have to fear diseases killing you. This year has been particularly tough on a number of my younger employees. Even some of the older ones are dealing with their own concerns, whether they have no children or children, and a social environment at home. I think it's really affected all people differently. I think right now the major problem is we don't have that slack in our schedule. And the changes that I'd like to affect are rebuked more often than not. And I'm just seeking out as many other options as possible to know that I've covered all my bases. before I say, like, honestly, I can't do anything here. I have to abandon ship myself.
That's
One of the interesting things I think about today, though, is just and I was kind of thinking about. I was reading the How Google Works book and about like how like they studied like what are the predictive measures of team success, and it had nothing to do with technology. And so much of what we talked about today was about like, as Wren said, like how are your people doing as humans, right? Like sometimes people are just having a tough time, and then it comes out in this like technical way. Or I do think sometimes in our industry we focus so much on like. Is this the right tool for the job? And then that's the reason why we failed, because we didn't architect this correctly. And I'd say 9 out of 10 times it's because like people didn't work together effectively to make the right decisions, right? Or they just didn't trust each other. So like I'm gonna ram my code through quick because I don't want someone to like all these sorts of like random human things. And more and more I realize the longer I do this that seems to be the better predictor of success or failure is stuff that has nothing to do with the actual binary stuff, right? So that's really interesting insight.
So one thing, and I know this is not possible to instill very quickly, from a culture standpoint, how to treat people with dignity and respect, and that sounds so curt, but like to me, like that is a big driver. And I can pull out through like Proverbs in the Old Testament, and I mean it's like a master class in human stuff and of ancient wisdom. But even Japanese culture, like I got through my martial arts, Japanese and Korean. I actually Hapkido, which is Korean. So please, but that whole like a lot of that respect stuff, the art of paying particular attention was one of the sayings we had in martial arts, right? And I try to play that in business, and not everyone gets it, but to the extent that you can have or encourage a culture of that high level of respect for your coworkers, I think that starts to affect how people work together, even if they're just kind of matching the room. And so, when you have a meeting, actually attending the meeting and paying particular attention. When you're a manager, not calling meetings that don't require people, you're showing respect to them for their time. These aren't magic. It's just some ramblings.
Frank also never asks us to do anything that he wouldn't do, and that's a level of respect that I love.
Anyway, well, I appreciate you all. So until next, who is anyone interested in presenting next month? We keep this thing going. As you can see, it's a friendly forum for.
I'll do it. Because apparently no one here knows how to set up Vim with Ruby. So I shall show you my Vim setup for Ruby.
If that would be cool. Everyone want to hear how he set up his Vim setup for Ruby? Cool. Bailey for February.
Whoa.
Send me a title, Bailey, and we'll plug it into the promo.
I'll start taking my notes in Markdown right now, compile it into Pandoc to a slideshow, and then send it to you.
Awesome sauce. Wren, thank you very much for presenting.
Nicholas, would you
go on?
Nicholas, before you drop off, if you're okay with it, would you mind dumping your email into the chat? Unless you don't feel comfortable. All right, cool. Thank you.